but welcome and good to see everybody. Thank you for listening.
I was gonna talk to you.
I was trying to be there last night, but we have a new baby in the house, so.
Ooh, exciting.
I'm George Johnson, I'm the chair, and I'm gonna go to my right.
Dan Rosenzweig, nonprofit habitat.
Chris Engel, City of Charlottesville, Office of Economic Development.
Brown, neighborhood phone services.
Bill Bronzio, planning commission, et cetera.
Michael Bain, Charlottesville City Council.
Sophie Linden, at-large member with nonprofit and neighborhood experience.
Nicole Crowe, real estate professional.
Alan Pura, City Manager's Office.
Kathleen Glenn Matthews, Charlottesville Redevelopment and Housing Authority.
Thank you. Are there any staff updates?
There are, and we also are down to secretary today. I don't know if anyone is able to just do some brief minutes. They don't have to be, super detailed, but might be.
What's going around?
Yeah.
I don't mind doing it.
I'm not gonna give it to you.
Oh, okay.
I'll double duty.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. I'm sure Mike appreciates it as well. And I want to thank the communications team. They've provided some support for us and will continue to do that. So
Oh, yeah,
no
that's so
longer
good.
having issues with our Zoom webinars. Some other updates, our Hobson half grant application periods are almost underway. The HOPS one opened September 19th and will close next Monday, the 20th. And then the CAF grant application period opens on the 20th and it's also open for a month. We have got about 15 applications that are in process so far. We had a workshop on August 1st and we got some good feedback that those are helpful for people. So we'll continue to hold those. We have a UVA public policy student who is working, she wanted to work on a project relating to housing in Charlottesville and she reached out to me. So she's going to be doing a policy analysis about the landlord risk reduction fund idea that's going to come out of CAP. And that analysis will include, analysis of the problem at hand and then some policy alternatives, one of which will include what would it potentially look like to move forward with that program or a potential alternative program that might solve that problem. Usually one of your alternatives is what happens if you do nothing. So I imagine that would be one as well. We are also engaging with 3TP, the same consultants who were at the last meeting, but some different folks in their office will be working on our ADU manual, affordable dwelling unit manual, specifically the fees, how there's been the calculation, those are supposed to be reviewed regularly, and as well as some of the more questions that have come up in the last, however, not quite 2 years, right? About how those fees are applied. And there's also the regional housing study that's going on. I think a lot of you may be aware of that. That is being administered by the Thomas Jefferson Planning District Commission, and they are working with the Virginia Center for Housing Research at Virginia Tech to work with localities to collect data, and then the Virginia Tech folks will be doing a lot of that, most of that data analysis. By the end of October, they will be coming out with some of their introductory qualitative outcomes, a literature review, and kind of an inventory of existing housing resources in all of the communities that are a part of the PJC. So if you're interested in learning more about that, we could have Lori Jean come and give a little update on that. We're happy to schedule that if that's something you would like to do. And the only other thing I wanted to note is there are a couple of committee members with terms that are ending at the end of this calendar year, so you will need to reapply. And I'll just reach out to you all individually, make sure you're aware of that. But if you don't already know, there's some terms. And that's it for me. Kelly?
Yes.
Any questions?
What is the status of the opening? In which you were, oh, Kelly's gonna talk about that.
Yes, so I have one update. We, as you all know, the housing program transitioned from OCS with OCS closure this summer to neighborhood development services this summer. At the same time, or essentially the same time, Anton Williams is a housing program manager. He resigned from the city. So we are left with Madeline, our star acting housing program manager. It has kind of in trying to figure out how to move forward, it has occurred to me that this is really an opportunity to take a step back and evaluate what are the needs of the housing program within the city of Charlottesville to meet the goals of the affordable housing plan, to steward the expectations of the development code. So I am happy to report that I've sent out an expression for proposals to a number of consulting firms. It's a list of consulting firms that was recommended to me by Virginia Housing, a list that they use for their capacity grants. And just received a couple of expressions of interest that they will be submitting responses, and we can get that program evaluation underway. I view it as an opportunity to input from stakeholders, so from you all, on what you view as the opportunities, the issues, and ultimately really kind of provide us with a fresh outside perspective on, how from a staffing perspective, the city can really meet the needs of the city in this space. So that's an update on the housing program from a staff perspective. Looking forward to getting those results to really then be able to kind of be in the best, strongest position possible to recruit for a new housing program manager. I think the caliber, the type of person we want in that role is someone who would want to know that we have we have an understanding of what the program really needs to be successful. So Madeline and I are continuing to join forces and divide and conquer to keep the wheels on this bus moving forward and prioritizing items that we can address. But certainly, I think we're all looking forward to being able to staff back up again. Keep you posted on that.
Would you mind sharing, like, I know it's still a work in progress around the RFP and everything else, but sort of like a timeline around how you see that playing out?
So I have asked for this to be approximately a 10 to 12 week timeframe. So I'm hoping that by the time I get responses and can bring somebody on board, that would be wrapping up toward the end of the year, first part of next year. And then with that, I could move into just start to figure out next steps.
Any other question? Okay, all right. Next thing on the agenda is the approval of the September 17 minutes.
I move approval as presented.
Give me a second. Any discussion on anything? Action change. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, it's been approved. And then I don't have my glasses, so if I miss something, somebody say something. But I see the line bank, but isn't Chris supposed to be doing a presentation?
Chris, I think Kelly's going to speak first a little bit about the land bank, and then that will lead us into Chris.
And that will leave it, okay,
Yeah.
okay, all right, because I was looking at it, see on here. Okay, so the Land Bank Authority of Charlottesville, status review and discussion.
Yeah, okay. All right. So great.
Do you want me to just?
Yeah. Oh, I think I can go up there.
If you would rather talk down there, I can just move the slides for you. So it's whatever you
Okay,
want.
can you guys hear me okay from down here? All right. Okay, so Land Bank Authority of Charlottesville. This is an item that was certainly been outstanding. You know, it was unresolved when OCS closed and housing transitioned to NDS. And so this summer and fall, I have been working with the team to try to gain an understanding of the work, all the work that's been completed to date, in consideration for how to realize creation of a land bank in Charlottesville. So today, what I'd like to do is share my understanding is of the history of where we are, some of the background, again, my understanding of what the city's recommendations have been to this point, and the rationale for creating a land bank. That's within the context of what the HAC has also recommended. What seem to be some of the most critical implementation considerations to move this forward. And then finally, kind of our staff reflections are kind of key takeaways now that I've been able to get up to speed, what I think everything I've learned means for how to move forward. And this is, I'm happy to be able to do this in this time frame. I think this conversation really dovetails well with the conversation about the table. And so certainly we could have discussion on the information I present after I share these slides. I would recommend that perhaps we wait until Chris also has an opportunity to share his information. And so we can kind of have a conversation thinking about the whole information that we're sharing. All right, so where we are today, this should all be familiar information. Starting in 2023, HAC resumed discussion of a land bank ordinance, strategy identified for consideration in the 2021 Affordable Housing Plan. In 2024, there were discussions with the city manager's office, the council. That consideration culminated in a HAC drafted ordinance presented to the city manager and deputy city manager at HAC meeting in August 2024. There were different perspectives shared on the best way to move forward, operational challenges. That draft was also presented to council in October of that year, and council charged staff with conducting a due diligence review and to come back with an updated version for council review. So in 2025, staff did that work and drafted an ordinance. Staff prepared an updated and revised ordinance and presented that to council in April of this year. And the staff ordinance does diverge from the HAC draft in several ways. So I will say, go ahead and advance. Very grateful to Alan, Shura, and Madeline in helping students understand where the points of divergence exist. What was the staff rationale for moving in a different direction? So I tried to distill what the staff recommendations are here, the rationale, hoping that kind of helps provide a better understanding of where we are in terms of staff recommendations. So the key elements of the staff recommendations were first to establish a land bank authority, and the goal there, or the driving factor in that, is to ensure transparency and accountability required for the handling of public tax revenues and general funds. So the intent here is really to prioritize transparency, accountability, recognizing, however, that this may potentially limit the quick action that could be possible in an independent nonprofit model that the HAC. We have been able to affirm, however, that the authority model can accept tax deductible contributions in CRA funds. So that does somewhat, I think, offset some of the concerns that were raised about the potential downsides of an authority. Staff also recommended to identify affordable housing as the stated purpose. This allows future discretion by the land bank board within a clearly stated mission, and kind of avoids locking in a pathway of the established affordable housing plan. That was something that the HAC draft proposed. This might be a detail, and certainly just responding to facial expressions. The staff recommendations are to enable the city manager to appoint any staff to serve in their stead. and allow interim board appointments. The rationale here is to enable flexibility in appointments to prevent potential delays. Versus what the HAC was requesting was that the leadership be with the department head or higher level. Moving on. Next slide. This is the last slide of the details. The staff recommendation was to restrict the authority to issue bonds, discharge liens, which is not allowed by statute, nor be exempt from municipal fees and charges. And the concern here was really that the land bank issuing bonds could impinge upon the city's bonding authority. It really requires a greater level of authority and accountability than an independent nonprofit could. The city would be comfortable with. There is some new statute language that Alan could perhaps speak to better than I about the ability to convey tax delinquent properties to the land bank, which may help address some of these concerns. And then these last few bullets, these were just additional key elements of the staff recommendations, not necessarily points of divergence from HAC, but just I think important to help round out an understanding of what the staff was recommending. The land bank would rely on an RFP process for property dispositions. This would be a Charlottesville specific entity, not a regional entity. It would rely upon the Virginia statute on fairness and avoidance of self-dealing rather than having specific language to that effect. The land bank would be allowed to receive up to 50% of tax revenue collections, and it remains silent on whether the land bank could be dissolved in order to reform as a nonprofit entity.
Can I ask a clarification question? Yeah. On the top section, this is under the staff recommendations, like a concern for land bank issuing bonds for, impinging on the city's bonding authority.
Mm-hmm.
Did we, I think we all assumed that that's an accurate assessment, but have we confirmed that if it were an authority and issued bonds, that it would impact city bonding capacity? Did we confirm that?
I don't know that we did. We asked for a legal opinion on that. It was discussed in the city manager's office that that's concerned, but we didn't ask for a legal opinion. So I can't say that I've got legal analysis on that.
Phrase the discharge means not allowed by statute. I don't understand that.
I don't either.
We get the land bank statute that says we can discharge liens.
Another one that I get to field.
And I will say at this time, I'm very grateful to Alan for helping me put together these materials.
Yes, it was our impression. If you recall, we had a UVA intern, a graduate student intern who was doing some research for us, and he actually was starting to attend land bank consortium meetings. There's a consortium of the X number of land banks in Virginia, and that was something that was being discussed, was that there was limited ability, unlike other states that have wide authority for land banks to discharge liens. Virginia's is fairly limited, and that has constrained the ability of some of the land banks in Virginia to operate as much as they had hoped to. There was discussions by that consortium about looking into some legislative changes to make the Virginia land bank entities law resemble the more liberal ones in Michigan, Ohio, et cetera. I don't know the details of all of that. I just know that that was the discussion that Stephen and I were a part of when we attended a couple of those meetings with the Land Bank Consortium, was their concerns that the ability to discharge liens was not as easy to do in Virginia because of the way the statute was written versus other states.
Without sidetracking, I think both of those questions, it would be helpful, whether maybe not in this meeting, but in a future meeting, just to have crystal clarity on. Sorry.
So, as Alan alluded to, something else that happened over the summer was some work to try to understand if we were to move forward with the land bank, what would it take? What would be the next steps in implementation? And there was a UVA intern, a graduate student that came on board and did some research on what would be required. And the basic steps are laid out here. So the public hearing and ordinance, I think that's something that we certainly already discussed. A board of directors would need to be appointed. We would need to develop and adopt bylaws, policies, financial guidelines, determine priority properties for acquisition, and then a funding and operational plan would need to be. So having documented, I think, the history to date, where we are as a city in terms of what we'd be comfortable moving forward, our understanding of what will be required to stand up this land bank. There's a couple of key takeaways, thinking about how to move forward. So first, in our assessment, the specific cost impacts of creating a land bank are significant. The staff that would be required would be at least a half to one full-time equivalent. So one staff person would really need to be dedicated to this effort over the next 6 to 12 months. Long-term, once land bank is established, we would need 1.5 to 2 new positions created, director, administrative staff, likely requiring indefinite commitment of resources to support the needs of the land bank. So probably goes without saying, but existing resources would need to be devoted to other priorities if we were to try to stand up this land. And the new FTEs required to run the land bank, those don't exist. There's also questions of new operating budget costs anticipated for other administrative startup needs. So the legal counsel, document preparation, office space, that's setting aside, the consideration for cost of acquiring and mowing the land. I think another key takeaway for us has been an acknowledgement that the authority model simply may not meet the needs and interests for quick action. It would be part of the city bureaucracy, the way the city is comfortable standing one up. However, there may be some other tools available to achieve financing goals. And this is really where we kind of segue to talking about the cable program. There may be ways to create a financing mechanism to support affordable housing development, different from the tools that are already in our toolbox. A quick strike fund would be kind of a layman's term. And if resources were available, the city could hold land at a lower cost. Or a nonprofit entity could do so until affordable housing development can come in. So that's another potential strategy that doesn't require a land bank. So I think that the takeaway for staff is that it would take a lot of work to stand up the land bank. We actually don't have the resources we need to really even make that happen if we were to divert our existing resources to do that. But there seems to be some potential to work on other program components that can achieve some of our goals. So with that, I'm happy to turn it over to Chris,
Sure.
Unless there are any additional kind of clarifying questions on what I've shared so far.
Okay, thanks, Kelly. So I'll try and fill in some gaps here and answer some questions. I think we shared a document with you in advance, so you probably have a sense of a little bit of what we're talking about here. Kelly referred to the cable fund, Charlottesville Affordable Bridge Line. Before I get into that, I'll back up a second and just tell you a little bit about CEDA and a little bit about how we got to this point in time. CEDA is the Charlottesville Economic Development Authority. Municipalities, localities, counties in Virginia have the ability to have economic development authorities. Most of them do. Most of them also have housing authorities. They are similar in a lot of ways. They're all created through the state code. There's a whole statute about economic development authorities and industrial development authorities, and then there's a whole housing authority side. So they're similar in many ways. Communities that don't have housing authorities but do have economic development authorities have the ability for the economic development authority to act as if it were the housing authority. In communities that have one of each, they kind of have their own swim lanes. We have had an economic development authority that started in 1976 as the Industrial Development Authority. We changed the name in about 2007 to better reflect what is actually happening in the city of Charlottesville, which was not a lot of industrial, as you might imagine, and we were kind of transitioning to less industrial, more just basic economic development type support. So in any case, if you want to read about authorities and their powers, it's all in the state code. And then there's a city ordinance that reflects the state code and establishes the body. The body is 7 members appointed by council, 4-year terms. They are the entity that help make the decisions related to anything the authority does. In general terms, the authority has the ability to buy and sell land, remediate land, manage land on behalf of a city. They do have bonding. I don't want to say authority, because to the question that Sunshine asked a bit ago, I think the answer for land banks and authorities it's very similar. So the Economic Development Authority can serve as a conduit issuer for bonds for industrial or nonprofits. If we were to issue our own bonds, it would impact the city's ability to issue. I know that for the authority. I'm guessing it's the same for land banks. The way these things function in Virginia is a little different than the way they function in other states. Probably not surprised to hear that. And it may take a legal expert on authorities, land banks, et cetera, to kind of give you that real clarity. But my guess is that it would impact the city's ability to issue debt, and which we kind of bump up against every year already. So in any case, a little bit of a sidebar there, but we do issue bonds on behalf of entities. And I want to just kind of clarify, because there's often misunderstanding that a bond is this magical thing where money just appears. It's really just a loan. It's an agreement between 2 parties. And when the EDA gets involved, we confer tax exempt status on that bond, which makes it more advantageous to both parties, but specifically the borrower that's seeking to build something. They don't have to pay federal tax on those bonds. So it allows them better financing. The most recent one the authority did was the UVA Alumni Association building a new building, and they're a nonprofit. They qualify under the statute. They came and sought conduit financing through the authority. We've done a number of others in and around for nonprofits. Live Arts is another good example here on the mall. That
just like my first previous question, clarification around how like a third party, like the EDA,
does not at all.
Why is that different?
Because the ability for the authority just to confer that tax exempt status, there's no liability from the city, there's no funds from the city, there's no funds from the EDA. We're just simply it's all tax code kind of stuff that goes back to the 1986 tax code when that changed and allowed this to happen. I'm not an expert on that. Won't pretend to be, but when we do conduit issuances, there's no impact on the city for its borrowing or its debt at all.
So in that scenario, UVA or the entity that you were lending to, they were carrying the risk and
100%
and the loan.
Yeah. So there's a bank and there's a borrowing party, and the EDA just sets it on the top and says, we can confer this because you do qualify, and you have to meet the statute that says you qualify.
Okay.
You have to be a legitimate 501c3, and there's some other things. And there's a whole stack of documents that go with each of those transactions, which means that the cost of issuance is significant, so that typically anything below like $3 or $4 million wouldn't venture into that space, because the cost of issuance, the attorneys and the accountants and all that involved kind of drive that up a little bit. So that's why you tend to see bigger projects and not smaller ones. But anyway, that's a little bit about CETA, and then how we kind of got here to considering an affordable bridge loan. I'm looking at Sunshine, and he was involved in this conversation some years ago. So the Economic Development Authority also serves to kind of convey performance agreements that the city wishes to enter into. Kindlewood has a performance agreement. It was the first one we did of this type for phase one. We've also done one for phase two. And that essentially allows the tax revenue that's generated from that project to be returned in the form of a grant. Once again, this is a Virginia workaround. You can't abate taxes in Virginia, but you can grant back an equivalent amount equal to the taxes that would have been paid to help a project succeed. We did that for Kindlewood, and that was somewhat groundbreaking in that it had not been done, certainly locally, and I don't think really in the state. The laws around the authority's ability to do that have since been tweaked, and the type of situation we engaged in with the nonprofit housing organization is now included in the state code for EDAs.
Can you give me an example of what it was and what got tweaked?
In the state code,
Yeah.
just simply added a line that said housing.
What was it before?
It just didn't, it was silent.
Almost like industrial.
Yeah.
Okay.
Infrastructure related, and then they added housing.
Oh, got you.
Yeah. So in any case, we were helping PHA in that effort and engaged in that. And in those conversations, kind of a side conversation was, well, it would be nice to have available funds for purchasing not something like Kindlewood, but something like a single family home that might be about ready to be sold and be transitioned to potentially not affordable status. And PHA and the land trust that's associated with PHA are in that business. And so this conversation about would there be any possibility that the EDA plays a role in that? At about that same time, and I have our strategic plan document, the Economic Development Office had a plan done in late 23. It was adopted in 24. One of the elements in there, as you might not be surprised, relates to housing and the fact that housing and economic development and jobs are intertwined. Our swim lane is the jobs and the workforce and entrepreneurship and whatnot. Kelly and others, nonprofits and others have a swim lane that's affordable housing and housing in general. But our plan did allude to the fact that to be successful in our work, we need to at least acknowledge there's a challenge with housing in and around Charlottesville. Our third section in the plan references that and just simply says, support the activities related to housing, the comp plan, the affordable housing plan, et cetera. So our board members, our 7 members, as we went through the plan and kind of dug in on each of the items, said, what can we do in this space? And that was kind of at the time we were having conversations around, is there a loan fund idea? And so that's kind of, those two things came together and we started to explore that a bit more. And then it got a little bit bigger, in which there was a meeting in this room of a number of kind of potential funders and nonprofits to maybe create something that's much bigger than what you see on paper today. That conversation sputtered for a couple of months, and then I think we finally decided that it wasn't ready. It was too complicated to pool funds from multiple sources to try and create something that would support the activity. So that could happen at a future date, and it may be happening somewhere else that I'm not aware of, but the local effort for that was kind of sunset for a moment. EDA still had an interest in supporting, as our plan suggests, and so we kind of engaged on a much smaller, simpler effort, and we've come up with this affordable bridge loan, which is just exactly what it says, a short-term loan, 12 to 24 months. Low interest rate, fairly simple terms and requirements, we hope and think, to specifically city-based nonprofits that are in the housing business that want to buy a piece of property that is in danger of potentially becoming unaffordable and keep it in the affordable space. So that's in a nutshell what it seeks to do. I wouldn't classify it as a quick strike fund in the classical sense that it might have been talked about. It's currently, its funding level is minimal, $500,000. That could be used in, 1 or 2 loans that would then be repaid and it would revolve. So these are loans, not grants.
If a nonprofit came to you, like what's the turnaround time to try to, what's the strike time?
It's very quick. We're trying to kind of keep it simple and keep it quick because that was another kind of pain point that was expressed to us is that, we can go to a bank and we can take 6 months and do all this. So we were trying to shrink that down. So this has been embraced and conceptually supported by the board with the caveat of working out the details. And that's kind of the phase we're in right now is to work out the details. One of the most significant of which is the collateral requirement that we would want to put in place to protect the funds. And as soon as you do that, it starts to go from simple and easy to very complicated. But the goal is like 30 to 45 days kind of time frame, like a very short window, as short as window as possible, to try and facilitate the rapid kind of, the needs that are out there. Because if a property goes on the market, it could go quickly. And I think BHA and Land Trust have had that happen to them over time, and potentially others have too. So in any case, the goal would be to make it as short as possible. I don't know that we can reach 30 days, but if we can iron out as many of the kinks in advance, then maybe that is possible. And I will say that this is a bit of a shot in the dark, a trial. It could work, it might not work. But it was a way that the authority could kind of dig in and address that one item that we didn't really have any meat behind at this moment. So maybe I'll pause there and see if there are specific questions. I kind of glossed over the actual document, but you've had a chance to read it.
Yes, first of all, I applaud this. I think it's moving in a great direction and it's a really needed tool. I'm seeing a couple of internal contradictions here, largely having to do with what you just spoke about in terms of speed. So when you limit it to $500,000 and the term to 2 years, you're really talking about is being able to get something under control. So you're talking about a deposit. We don't have 60 days. We don't have 30 to 60 days to get that. And the thing that's going to make this cumbersome is requiring land as collateral because you're going to need an appraisal, which takes time. And oftentimes our biggest challenge, we can get bank loans anytime we want, but we don't often have unencumbered. Because we try to leverage what we do to do the most work, we often don't have simply unencumbered land. So I would ask you to push yourselves as far as you can in terms of your collateral requirements. Maybe there's other things, balance sheet, pledges of deliverables. A lot of us operate on a receivable model, so we have a ton of money coming over the next few years, but it's reimbursable. And so anyway, if you could get more creative around that, you'll differentiate yourself from a normal bank and be able to decrease that timeline. And we're talking this thing to be successful needs to be turned around. Piece of property goes for sale. We get under contract right away. We know that we can pull down this money to put a large deposit down. So I would suggest that. And then the other thing is that I know the details have to be worked out, but I get scared by bullet point number 2 under applications must include a comprehensive plan for the acquisition and a renovation and lease occupancy to include financial plan renovation. That's due diligence that you do after you get something under contract or under your control. Then you start to invest some money in a land plan. That's when you start to think through the pro forma, and that takes a little time to generate. That won't happen before you have to get this land under control. So if that could be streamlined, something a little bit more general, a general description of what you intend to do would probably be best.
Yeah, I think we kind of want to be somewhere in between there. the comprehensive word probably gets some folks, but we feel like we need some indication of what the plan is and that there is a reasonable plan and what affordability levels you intend to embrace.
I think that's
Those kind of things. It's not intended to be lots of documents, but a basic kind of.
It's more generally speaking, we imagine doing multifamily under 80%. If you could accept that, that would be better than, this is fine. As it's written here anyway.
Fair enough. Yes, sir.
I don't want to get too much into the weeds. So as a preface, let me say that I own a mortgage bank and we do bridge lending and super fast leverage buying all the time. I have programs for that. I have policies for that. I've got my competitors' policies for that. I've got the people I sell these things or borrow the money from policies for that. And I agree with Dan, 30 days might as well be 90 in a lot of these circumstances, but getting a fast turnaround to at least to a preliminary, that's a deal, go do it, with some work. And I'm happy to discuss with you. You can get that down to a couple of days in funding. I typically can commit in a day or two and fund in 2 weeks. And a lot of that has to do with evaluating the collateral, what level, there's a whole bunch that goes to it. But to me, I think considering the relatively limited funds we're dealing with, speed is key because you got to turn it. And in a 2-year term, if you've got 2 loans out there for a 2-year term, you don't have a revolving fund anymore. You've got 2 2-year loans out. So there's got to be this might be a way to say, to use this would be, this is the initial grab and then follow on money from somewhere else can come relatively quickly, but not in 2 years. Unless you've got a lot more money to play with, or you can come up with sort of a steady product, I think. But I'd be happy to chat with you about that because this is, I make my living doing this. So.
that would be helpful. One thing I should say that this has evolved a little bit as the group has been thinking about it. And it wasn't originally set up as a line of credit / loan. To the speed issue, if it were a line of credit, and to the collateral issue about unencumbered. And we did field test this a little bit specifically with the Land Trust and PHA. And they indicated that it would be easier to provide collateral, unencumbered collateral on something they already own that they're not leveraging in advance of maybe we're going to come to you in a month or two. Let's get this squared away first. And if it's a line of credit, then it can kind of be set up in advance. The EDA board got a little uncomfortable with that. So we've backed off that and kind of made it more into, let's just do a straight loan and see if that works. But I'm hearing what you all are saying in terms of speed, and it's difficult to do that.
Split that baby where you have a piece of collateral that's going to stand for a good bit of it, and that way the evaluation of the thing you're buying is going to lead on both. You're not that concerned, and your equity is better. I mean, again,
good thought.
Happy to chat.
Yeah.
I thought about this when Chris was talking about it for, nonprofits that are kind of not as established, like, New Hill Development Corporation. And I know there's a group of Black and Hispanic mothers that want to find like a co-housing community. And because they don't have the established relationships with banks or, steady funds coming in from private lender or private, donations, this would be great for them. I know New Hill lost property this year because they couldn't act quickly. And for them, getting property under contract and having like 45 days, $500,000 for like a lot in Belmont, or, I think this would be really beneficial for those like startup nonprofits that are looking for something, like a smaller project. So I don't know. That's what I thought of, but those are also fascinating perspectives. Yep, exactly. That would, yeah.
Partners with the current property owner, buys the sublot, does it, gets out.
Yeah. I know if this were in place, I think New Hill would have would have a project moving forward, and even just having like that option, this option, and the certainty of this option would have made the seller feel more comfortable that there was certainty happening, right? Because there's a lot of people in the community that own land that are trying to pass it to company or organizations like New Hill. So there's some level of patience, but having something like this would be great. That being said, I do want to go back to the land bank. And are we talking about this almost like replacing the land bank as a function? Because I don't know, maybe I'm wrong about this, but I think this is great, the capital program. But the land bank I almost see as filling the role of, there are so many properties in Charlottesville and areas in Charlottesville that, you know, wrongs have been done to minority communities, right? And I think of like the West Haven project, the West Main Street project, and the city and the land bank taking control of these properties and taking the time to do and develop them right is something that I saw this, you know, the land bank doing. And that's not something that this capital fund will do, even though it is awesome. I'm glad it's happening. And so I guess, I mean, maybe I'm wrong about this, but I thought that the land bank idea was, you know, we're opening up density and that's great. We need more housing in our community, but there are definitely, you know, areas of our community where we want the city and our community to take control of and develop them in a collective way that we all want, and mindfully and intentionally. And so I think we're losing that with the loss of the land bank. And I don't know if you guys agree with that, but.
Sunshine had his hand up, and then Pepe.
Pause mine, let's keep with that thread. I'll bring mine back up.
Okay, Pepe.
It seems to me that critical to what Kelly presented is the results of the feasibility study that's 3TP is going to do, which might make a land bank moot, not functional for the city. And I don't remember when we're going to get that information about the 3TP feasibility study.
So there was a presentation in September to HAC providing a status update on the tax abatement study. Alan's here and can go into detail as needed. That was really to provide an update and try to get some feedback on the feasibility numbers that they have put together so far. They are working on their final report, and the schedule is that would likely come forward to planning commission, maybe we say before the year.
But that's the tax abatement program.
That's right. And so that's really focused more on the idea of creating a tax abatement tool that would support larger scale development by abating the taxes on the affordable units that would be created. I'm just trying to think if there's a connection.
What I was just thinking that was a critical aspect of the land bank, but it's not. Okay, right, my fault.
To answer part of your question, this was developed wholly exclusively of any land bank conversation. This, as I suggested, was trying to address the strategic plan that referenced housing. And so it's not intended from our perspective to be a replacement or anything. It does kind of connect to some of the work that a land bank could do if one were to be formed, but it was not.
Oh, I'm sorry, I couldn't see back there. Kathleen.
Yeah, just on in the same vein, I was also curious about just how the tie-in would be with community planning to economic development. I think economic development, helping increase revenue in the community, but also, on the planner side, this conversation of translating what the community wants and, shaping what can be built and how it can be used. I'm just wondering how that's all going to get tied together, with this different element versus a land bank.
It could seem.
Yeah, I think maybe that's a good segue to what I was going to share before. Because one of the pieces that does feel like it's significantly the disjunction between and even though they were developed separately, but like the idea of the cable being one proxy tool instead of a land bank. One significant disconnection is that the land bank, part of that goal and a lot of the work that we did as a body was to ensure sort of community oversight. where if the cable tool, which I think we all in general support, if that's the only tool that's at play, it doesn't have that aspect embedded within its structure. So anyway, that's just one point of clarity there, that there's a loss if that's the only tool we end up using. But then Chris, back to where this question of a loan versus a line of credit, and I did want to resurface, and it sort of got touched on the end, but around the idea of sort of like pre-qualifying, even if it is not a true line of credit, maybe it's still a loan situation. Just like you might pre-qualify for a loan for a house as an individual, you go through the diligence process ahead of time, so that when it is time to move, you can move quickly. And then related to that, this builds on Dan's comments around a specific site that you want to pursue. I would advocate strongly that the pre-qualification process needs to include financials, but maybe it's also just like organizational history, meaning if you know that Habitat or CRHA or ourselves or whoever, we are in the business of doing this work, we may not have absolute clarity on what that plan is for that site at that moment in time, but having a little bit of trust and faith that we'll figure it out. And if it doesn't work, well, then we let it go. So, or we resell or whatever. I mean, that rarely happens. We typically know generally what we're trying to aim for. But not going through like any sort of, having faith that we know how to do what we do.
Yeah, so to piggyback exactly on that, back into my wheelhouse on bridge lending and fast turn money, the exit strategy is the second question you asked. The first question is, what are we buying? The second one is, how are we getting out of the deal? And, one of the things to do in structuring this is having the set of scenarios for this type of lending in general, and then to know relatively quickly, even if Sunshine's organization happens to face plant in this way, we still get out with this, and we've still got a way to go. So that at least nominally, so that the risk of the capital really isn't that much of a risk. That there's a quick and dirty way to extract CETA from the deal if that's necessary. And I think that once there's some assurance on that, then the sort of capacity for the generalized risk goes up. I mean, worst case scenario, here's what we do, and we claw our money back this way. Not ideal, but we're out. And there are a whole series of.
Could you get a guarantee from the city, for example, or use unspent funds in the house, funds that are sitting in the housing fund, something like that. You're just trying to hedge your risk. Right. Yeah. And there are other ways to do it. I think requiring, I'm just telling you as someone who chases after loans all the time to acquire land, that most of us are leveraged to the hill. We should be, because we're trying to do more. So if there's anything that the city can do to hedge that risk.
So I can just respond, Nicole, to your question about is this replacing the land bank? I think echoing the maybe saying in a different way what Chris said, that's not the intention. I think the intention is that the land bank, the way the city is comfortable creating one, wouldn't accomplish the goals that the hack has articulated for the quick action, for potentially providing financing tools. And there's also just a capacity issue, and like what are the right priorities for the city to be focusing on right now to stand up new programs. And so I think the thought is that we could focus on the cable program could be the focus in this phase 4 now. And we can return to the idea of the land bank at another time. And
we should talk about it every 3 years.
Okay.
No, it's just funny because we have it.
For 3 years, every 3 years.
Yeah, exactly. It's a perpetual conversation.
Sunshine.
So recognizing that the recommendation coming from staff around the structure of the land bank wouldn't necessarily achieve all that we've talked about trying to get to. Let's cast, as a thought experiment, cast forward in time 2 years. Let's say the land bank is operating. Let's say the shelter conversation hadn't happened yet, and then 2600 Holiday Drive came up. And there was this 30-day window to walk it down, blah, 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 blah. Would the land bank be the appropriate authority in that moment in time, as you conceive of the staff conception of it, to go through that transaction, or is it still not operating in that way?
He's talking about the homeless shelter.
You're talking about Holiday Drive?
Yeah. So just like would the land bank be the functional entity instead of the city purchasing Holiday Drive if the land bank had been in place for a couple of years?
I don't know, but I doubt it. My sense is I doubt it. The housing authority can own land, the economic development can own land, but the city's going to buy.
I think that it's a real.
Sorry, the city can also, just to make sure I understand, the city can also purchase property. You don't need the land bank to purchase
the city's under contract to purchase 2000 Holiday Drive right now. So you I mean, I guess in theory it could, if it were formed and it were, stood up and, everybody was happy with how it was working, but the money would come from the city to the land bank, and then the land bank would own it. So it could, but.
Yeah, not want to go like on the spot, but as a city councilor, I'm curious what your perspective would be in that.
So, I mean, I think it's a good theoretical example of, let's say that opportunity came up and we did not have a year in surplus left to allocate to it. I don't think anyone is under the impression that issuing bonds is free money. Everyone understands that it has to be paid. It's more expensive than paying in cash. But as a practical reality, most affordable housing purchases we can't bond. And as a practical reality, a lot more things can happen if something becomes eligible to be bondable as opposed to in cash. Like the Buford Middle School project can happen if it's bondable. It can't happen if it has to be paid with cash. So for these larger acquisitions of a portfolio of 100 units or several hundred units of multifamily, the land bank, I think, would play a role. All of which is to say, in a world where we did not have a year in surplus to allocate and pay for Holiday Drive in cash, I could see a land bank being an entity if it was deemed that's the best way to make it bondable. And if that year in surplus did not exist, I would guess that the city would not have made that purchase if it couldn't have been bondable, because the concern would have been the immediate fiscal capacity is not there to do it.
And then the question about, is a land bank able to do bonding that doesn't impact the city would play in there if there was not cash available. But
and I'll just end by saying I think the power of it is that you could make more affordable housing related purchases bond eligible than is currently the case right now.
Still have to pay the debt service, so which would have to come from.
And I hear you, but let's okay. If a year in surplus didn't exist, there could be a $10, $15 million purchase of 150 units that would not happen if it could only be done with cash in that moment. So that's.
I do want to.
It's not free money.
I do want to echo, it's frustrating. I think that, it's been talked about for a very long time, and I don't know if it needs to be a land bank, but I think having somebody at the city focus on trying to buy city property and have community engaged development is something that is really critical as part of a successful zoning ordinance change too. I mean, I think it's really important, and if anything, I think it should have already been in place at this point. And I don't know. I mean, I know that it's hard to get all the things done, but I'm disappointed that we're here.
Well, to address that directly and our capacity issue, we started talking about a revolver strike fund and development fund in NDS in 2017 and 2018. And we might have made progress with that in a significant way, if John Sales did not have his head on fire trying to do all the jobs that because he was on the spot at that point to do all of that, there were not the people to organize. And one of the things is we're now down to Madeline, and every time we put a task out there of any kind, I've just got flashbacks to scanners or something that her head's going to explode. There's only so much she can do, and I think that might be, and to your point, the issue is we can talk about standing up a land bank with money we don't have and people we don't have to run it without, and at this point, we really need to figure out to have the human capital, I think, to be able to manage the larger scale that we want.
The money.
Yeah, but we've got $10 million flowing out, but we also made a commitment. We've also got this commitment and this came from Sunshine, says outside of that $10 million, can we get $1 million commitment for administrative costs for all of this? And we got sort of a soft yes. This was 4 or 5, 6 years ago?
Sort of.
Yeah, sort of a soft yes, but we don't have that. And I think at a larger strategic level is, if we're going to be spending these millions of dollars to make these acquisitions, human cloning is beyond our reach. So we need to get some people in here with the skills to do it. And
money.
Yeah.
And I share Nicole's frustration when I saw the FY 20, 2 years from now budget.
Whatever number.
And essentially my condensation of that document is it's going to take too many people and too much money to move ahead on it. And it's something we will consider down. And when I also think it's an important priority.
I think part of the interesting things in this moment, and I agree with everything Nicole said earlier and others have said as well, is in this most recent iteration, the original recommendation from the HAC was to have it be an independent nonprofit entity or attached to an existing nonprofit. Staff said it should be an authority. And then staff led us down this road to establishing it as an authority. And now we're being told that's not feasible. So we're kind of back to square one, where we might as well, at this point, open up the conversation of should it just be an independent nonprofit or attached to an existing nonprofit if this is the direction. But it was not HAC or the community saying, you really want this to be definitely a city authority. That was originally coming from OCS staff.
Well, not necessarily OCS staff.
Sorry, just let me, that's correct. I'm sorry.
Right?
Just staff at some level.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Sam flat out said.
Yeah, it's the city.
The city manager flat out
It's very clearly about that.
The city position is that, given that we're talking about the tax dollars, the level of comfort is that this entity exists as a city authority, rather than as so yes, that's very clear, right? That we are, as a city, not comfortable with the idea of an independent nonprofit, although that is, what the desire of the HAC is.
And since that is clear, then, there has to be a conversation with Sam in the room or whomever, that there has to be some commitment to fund this, to pay a person to be able to do this if they're truly committed to one, the land bank, and that it should be a part of the city. I
think we are hearing what you are saying.
Yeah, but I would like for Sam to be in the room so we can talk it out, not keep sending messages to you all, to him.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
How do y'all feel about that before you go to your question?
Sorry.
That we should have Sam in the room.
I think that'd be great.
To say, okay, we hear you, and we're gonna ride with you down the lane, but here's what.
Step up and do it.
Yeah, we're gonna have to put something. We have to put money into it to be able to hire that 1.5 person or two, so they're focusing on it. right? I think there has to be some kind of commitment in the budget to be able to do this. We're not disagreeing. I'm not disagreeing. I don't know most of my colleagues that it should start out being a part of the city because that's what we talked about, right? It could start being a part of the city and then transfer on its own, right?
But that's not in this recommendation now.
I see, I know, but I'm just saying that's the conversation I know that I've been a part of.
Yeah.
Is that let's start out with it being a part of the city and then see how it goes and then transfer it over. Either way we go, it's going to need capital to be able to pay someone to be keeping their eyes on it and doing the work.
If I can just offer, I think, one observation I'm making about this conversation is that we're having a conversation about a specific tool to accomplish a specific goal. Slightly without talking about maybe the other priorities that we have to achieve affordable housing goals in the city, and they are numerous. So far, they are only on this piece of paper, but I'm very much looking forward to.
And you might add one for me is that we need to define affordability and for whom.
Yes, exactly.
That has been mine from day one.
And so when I, hear about very specific recommendations to add more staff to accomplish a very specific goal, I get a little, I'm just being honest, I get a little uncomfortable because I know that there's a lot of things that we want to be accomplishing and a lot of reasons for bringing in new staff. And
fine, more is better.
So what I think would be good is if we could kind of zoom back out and maybe it's at a very, and then maybe this is a segue to your next item, at a meeting soon, we talk about what is everything on the list and how do we want to prioritize those things and what is really what are the best strategies to achieve our goals, recognizing that, yes, a land bank is a great tool, but you also need money to fund the purchases that you want to make. And so do we have there's a lot of different pieces to this puzzle. And are we trying to stand up a land bank so we can make multi-million-dollar purchases for a homeless shelter, or is it more for, right? So what is it actually that we're trying to achieve? So I definitely recognize the frustration, and I have certainly, just from listening to many of you in conversations, understand how much work has gone into this. I really think we have an opportunity to hone in on one particular strategy here in the near term. And if we can just allow ourselves maybe some time for some additional conversations to think about the whole
picture. You gotta wait for sunshine. And
I would really think that would be a good thing to do.
You can go to your question now. I'm sorry I derailed you.
First of all, I want to acknowledge and appreciate that I think this body has historically operated through a strategic lens, like not just getting caught up in a singular myopic thing, but ultimately wanting to create a range of tools, recognizing there's no single tool to address it. You know this as well as anybody, and that we need every tool in the tool belt, but not necessarily every tool at the compromising tools we know we want to have over here. So I think there is value in a little bit of a step back and being comprehensive and thoughtful around what tools we want to prioritize and what the actual costs and benefits of each of those tools are. I think that would be helpful. What I was going to say earlier is, correct me if I'm wrong, but the pain or the risk that the city saw in the nonprofit centered model of the land bank was the use of bonding authority on behalf of the city without real city control. Is that the singular risk point, or is there an additional risk point beyond that?
They did specifically mention.
It's also the tax revenue.
Tax revenue, that was the specific. I think that we sort of moved away from the bond issue as being less central during the conversation, but there was anxiety about the tax revenue.
Meaning the 50% that comes back.
Which I did not understand, because that's 50% of, that's an improved property that you would presumably that would be at a higher level. You're getting the money that you would have gotten, and the other 50% goes to housing. So I didn't understand the logic of that.
So, there's another, since I recognize your questions here, there is another, path we can take here. Alan alluded to there being a land bank consortium that we have become familiar with. I mean, if you would like, we could continue these conversations. There are some experts in this field of land banks that could come in and talk to us a little bit more about the questions that you're raising, potentially help find some sort of middle ground. I mean, we could do that. We could continue to try to find a solution that works for everybody. Again, I think it takes time. Sorry, just it takes time away from us being able to focus on other things. But if that is something you would like to pursue, that is kind of another option here at this point. But I don't know if we're going to.
Noted, and I think it may be worth conversing about that. The flip side of my question was more for the hack, myself included. If the pain point of it having been nonprofit centric is, I'm just going to say for a moment, it is just a bonding authority. I know the tax revenue wants a piece here too, but would we still want to see a land bank move forward, even if we let go of the bonding authority piece? We sort of did not utilize that. Would it still have value in our eyes?
Well, I thought that it would. I think we really turned away from the bonding issue. Really, the funding source was thought to be CRA funds and other ability for the nonprofit to make money. And there would be a city investment to stand it up, but the idea would ideally not to have to go back to the city for serious money. That was the idea, that we could, if you were in the business of disposing of property or selling it, therefore you had money coming in, you just needed revolving funds from some source to keep going. And CRA was my suggestion for how to get there. As soon as, provided we still have a CRA that means anything.
Okay, so maybe this ties back to what you're essentially suggesting, Kelly, which is our last thing. Which is if we do want to continue moving forward in partnership with some, consortium that might provide additional outside guidance, is there a path forward we can navigate, which maybe it lives in the city, we can figure out the bonding thing, or maybe it lives outside the city. Still, there's still an ordinance that constitutes it, but sets aside the bonding authority piece. We have to navigate through the tax revenue piece, but in a way that still allows us to use that as a tool. And the holder of ideally, which is long-term, a strike fund in some way. Because I think that was really the core of what we're trying to get, is like a strike fund so we can lock things down. Like that's the essence of it. And the land bank was a mechanism for doing that. And cable is a starting point, but it's not the scale it needs to be, nor is it strike yet. It's not quick strike fund. So I think that's still what we're trying to solve.
Nicole, do you mind if I jump in front of you? Because I wanted to address that in particular.
Yes.
I think maybe, Kelly started by saying that they're prepared to do an overarching study of what's the staffing needs that would be done in order to meet not the land bank, not only the tactics, but the goals, which are reconciliation of supply and demand for affordable housing in the community. So I'm supportive of that. One of the things that I might suggest as an incremental step, because it won't require going out and appropriating money for new FTEs, finding those FTEs, training those FTEs, finding a place to put them, is the CAF or the city making a larger contribution to cable. So it's not restricted to $500,000, set it up at $3 million or something like that. Or 3 million I just threw out, but, or actually making cable actually work the way it's supposed to work, which is a strike fund, backing those loans. So there's no need for a land-based collateral and appraisal. So there's actually money set aside to hedge the risk for cable. So let's make in the interim, while we're figuring out what staffing needs we have to fulfill everything on here. I'm interested to see a piece of paper there. Let's give that time to germinate and get that right while we fund properly this thing that actually will start to deliver what we want, which is the ability to lock up land quickly.
would you be in support of that if it meant we wouldn't fund another affordable housing project in the budget next year? Like, I'm just thinking of what our affordable housing budget proposals are right now, and we're over our $10 million. So if we want to have another $1 million, $2 million to go into cable, that's just one project that's not going to get funded, is all I see it. So then that's also resulting in a potential loss of affordable housing.
Yeah. So I guess my perspective,
the trade-offs.
Yeah, my perspective on that is that it's, that's council and the city manager to figure out how to fund it, whether it's through CAF specific appropriations. This is one-time money. Like if you feed this thing once, or you set aside one chunk of money as collateral, as cash-based collateral once, you don't need to keep doing it because it's a revolving loan fund. And so maybe it is maybe that's something that council, given it within the context of trying, everybody knows we need more staffing and we need staffing that's consistent with the goals and strategies. It's going to take a little time to get there, but maybe looking at the totality of funding needs, that's for, I think, council and city manager to say, yeah, it is worth it. But I think that this could have some legs and accomplish in the interim until we stand up a land bank, until we have the staff to stand up a land bank. It could accomplish a lot of what the land bank was trying to do. And here we are in 2025. We could have this by the end of this fiscal or by the beginning of next fiscal year, whereas the land bank is going to happen. It's just a thought. So I know that's a namby-pamby non-answer, but I trust the city manager's office and council to make that decision. I would put forward this as a proposed alternative that might get us where we want to go eventually.
Yeah, it's land bank not happening right now. Let's do something else.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've all said it well, where we were trying to accomplish a lot with the land bank, and that was, A, have a, quick fund for nonprofits, B, do community organizing and right the wrong, there were a lot of things that were baked into what the land bank wanted to accomplish. And I appreciate that staff has a bazillion things they want to do, and things have gotten so much better over the past 5 years. I just want to be grateful for that. I don't know. I would be interested in seeing, having a bird's eye view of the priorities and goals. And I mean, maybe it's really just a council discussion. I just want to emphasize, I think in order for the zoning ordinance to be successful, having somehow, I don't know if it's a land bank or whatever, but somehow have resources and energy and attention directed to community-based development of new properties. I just think that's really important for the zoning ordinance to be successful. I know there's a million things, but.
No, I definitely agree with that. And I think that is certainly my priority. I think it's council's priority. Is the land bank is something that we got close to. I guess we weren't actually that close.
It felt like
we felt for like maybe we were close. It was something to accomplish the goal. But the fundamental goal is how to get the city more able to get involved in property acquisition, including substantial property acquisitions for community development that the community has control over, as you said, nonprofit development, and also community wealth building. So people in these neighborhoods have businesses that connect with a price point that's affordable to them, job opportunities, ownership opportunities as well. And that to me is not like a tangential goal. I think the zoning code doesn't work without that. Otherwise, we're going to have a zoning that works somewhat well for young professionals at 120% AMI, doesn't really do a whole lot for people at 30 to 50% AMI. And in some areas for a renter and making $15 an hour less might actually make their life worse. So that's all.
I think
Thanks to my list here.
Not that makes it easier.
I think it's, and I don't want to feel like I'm beating up any department in the city, but sometimes I have to beat it up to kind of figure it out. But I visited Greensville, South Carolina, and their planning department does things totally different from what this planning department does. They're invested. They have people who are invested in a community. We used to have them where, I forgot what the other person name, probably back in the days, they used to have workers who, they're with Rose Hill, they're with, they're, you know, and that was their ground, neighborhood planners. And I think we have just got away from that. And I just wanted to plug that because I was just amazed. Grant you, Greensville in South Carolina have more land than we have, okay? However, they knew the folks in the neighborhood who had their home, who been living there for years, whose kids have moved away, who they want to really develop around them. And what they did was, you know, they would work with Nicole and say, hey, Nicole, let's do a land swap, right? Because we have some land over there, keep you in the neighborhood. We'll help to figure out how we build your new home, just so that she can move from where she is to there so they can redevelop. To me, that is invested in your neighbor and in the community. And I don't see it here. I haven't seen it for a while. It was here for a minute when I was green, where preservation of neighborhoods and you're just being involved in it. But I don't see that anymore. And then to hear you say, we don't have enough people to do all the things that needs to be done, probably do need to back up and look at how we serving the Charlottesville community, you know. So that's just my, just wanted to share that with you. I see it work. I've seen it work. And I'm asking, well, how do you do this? And they're saying, this is what we do. You know, this is what this person do. Anything that is going to be built or going to be sold or whatever in this neighborhood, then Dan is the person, that's Dan's job, and he worked with that community. But we don't have that here. We've moved away from that. And so,
yeah, I mean, we have our development review planners are assigned to different parts of the city, and those are kind of like their neighborhoods, right? But their responsibility is reviewing applications for development that come in. They try to keep the communities aware of what's happening, but because our development code is now essentially by right, you know, there's not that same sort of opportunity for the negotiation and the discussion about, you know, what the community is interested in. Now,
but it seems to me like this planning department is more on the developer side than they are on the community side.
So we'll put in a plug for our long range planning department or division, you know, that we created. And I came on board. Osea Kimberton, she's just right over there.
Yeah, she's gone.
Tori on her team, you know, there's two of them though, right? And I don't know how large Greenville is, you know, what their resources look like, but at the end of the day, we are a small community, right? And
it was a small community then. We were smaller than what it is now.
But I think, and I mean, fundamentally, though, I hear what you're saying, and I do think that.
Yeah, that's all I'm saying. It's just that there is a piece that's missing, and that's why you always see us waving our flag to say, wait a minute, you missed something because of the community involvement piece of it. It's okay to be involved in the community with just your neighbors, but there's a much bigger piece of it is what the city code said and what this says, where we have to understand it, embrace it, and maybe need to change. That doesn't happen here. But anyway, I'm going, you got one more so we can move to the.
Yeah, I was going to build on what you were just saying because and I don't know if Sam or James brought this up in your sort of onboarding and discussion of various things, but as part of the final sort of rezoning, not negotiations, but discussions, and it's specifically around the core neighborhoods. That was a central part of our conversation, obviously, for lots of important reasons. So one of the concepts is that we ultimately decided to have this differentiation in the residential code between core neighborhoods and non-core neighborhoods as not a temporary measure, because the code is permanent, for legal reasons you can say it that way. But the goal was for it to be a placeholder of sorts to then move into and dedicate resources to small area planning work, similar to what had happened at Fifeville. That resulted in some really important work that has become critical to them advocating for what they want. But have the Tenton pages and the other neighborhoods, have the time and resources spent to work with them to develop those small area plans, to evaluate whether the code that's there now is what they actually want to see and make suggestions for potential changes. And then the seed that I planted with Sam on the dais of a meeting, and he didn't shoot me right offhand, was that one of the opportunities is in the new zoning, if we applied essentially neighborhood-wide TIFs over those neighborhoods, so that when those neighborhood plans were established and it was the voice of the community, then there was actually a growing pot of money based on incremental increase in revenue, not all of it, but a portion of it, that would then go to support the specific initiatives and goals those neighborhoods had, which implies that you have a connection point between staff and the neighborhoods in a way that's more robust than it currently is.
So I'm very familiar with the history of the creation of the RNA zone. The idea that small area plans should be created. I mean, that was exactly why I created the long range planning division separate from our development review team to really be able to focus on small area planning. And Ose and Tori, Mike Parisi, they are working on the Tenton Page and Roselle small area plan as we speak, planning for a community meeting. They've been to multiple community meetings to try to, right now she's recruiting for members of a technical panel actually to support that planning process. So please spread the word that she's actively looking for partners in the community to collaborate with her on that effort. And this will be the just as Fifeville, we created a plan, 10th and Page, Rose Hill, they will have a plan. Other neighborhoods will follow. So that is definitely the intent. And we have a small area plan implementation program. There are funds that are, intended to be used for the recommendations of those plans. And that is very much, that is a responsibility of OSE's team. It was formerly actually a responsibility of OCS and something that transferred over to OSE when OCS closed.
And I know that you are
there's only
the new the new person in charge there, but we don't have a good trust with the planning department. People have not had a good trust working relationship with the planning department because we felt like they're more support the developers. And so there's a trust piece there too that is going to be something that you have to overcome. Your department have to overcome.
Joy, when you say we don't have trust, who you talking?
The neighbors, the community.
So so different neighborhoods, your neighborhood?
Mine, yeah.
Okay.
South First Street, yeah. Tenton Page, Riverside. No. Yeah. So, because when things are happening, if FAR is not, and legal aid is not looking at what's getting built in their neighborhood, the residents don't know until they see it happening.
Yeah, I think this is.
So I hear about I'm pointing that out to you about finding people to serve on those. It's very, very difficult for people. And, because I was in the meeting with her when she was asking, you don't have Pepe's no more. Pepe used to come to my house and hunt me down wherever and said, I will work with you to get you involved in the community. We don't have much of that anymore, right? And so what I'm saying to you is that we can find people, but it's probably the same person who is already doing something else. Is nobody else new because they feel like nothing is going to change and you're going to do what you're doing. I'm only saying that to you as someone new, that's an obstacle that you have to like overcome.
I feel for Kelly because there's these competing forces that you're inheriting.
Right. I mean,
from going back, well, I could go back 250 years, but I won't. But one of the reasons why neighborhood planners were kind of phased out. Not that they are. I mean, they still have zones, but we became so balkanized that neighborhood planning became a tool of white supremacy. Because where was the power centers in Charlottesville? It was in mostly the white organized neighborhoods with strong neighborhoods. And so there was never any ability to think citywide. Right. So like when neighborhood planners were the locus of planning and power in the city, something like a comprehensive zoning code was impossible. And I just want to be really careful that we articulate that we want to go back to that we don't actually want to go back.
I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're saying, but it is still necessary. They just have to be retrained. It's still necessary that you have a relationship with a community that you are going to continue to gentrify or regrow or whatever. I know Charlottesville has to grow, right? We can't sprawl because of the 100-year in whatever that thing. But we know we have to grow and we might have to go up, but at least work with the neighborhood. That is not happening.
No, and I think that to Sunshine's point, that was the compromise of core neighborhoods than RN was let's treat them differently. Let's give them some of the privileges that those neighborhoods had stripped from them at the expense of the neighborhoods the R1 neighborhoods that made all the decisions. It was really about NIMBYism and keep poor people out of my neighborhood. Let's invert that. And that's what our zoning code kind of did. It put special protections over our N. And again, this idea that what we'll do is come forward with small area plans and a TIF, a specialized hyperlocal TIF in that neighborhood so that the decision-making could be done by the families in those neighborhoods. I'm not sure that I really want to extend that citywide, but I think what we're talking about is a zoning code that is reparative of things that have been done over the course of the last half century or so in the name of good zoning practice that have been exclusionary. And so I guess what I'm saying, Joy, is I'm very, very supportive of this in the RN neighborhoods. I'm not supportive of this citywide in my neighborhood. I don't want my neighborhood association to have the same rights and privileges.
I'm talking about our low income community.
No, and that's what I'm saying is that as long as, and I know this sort of starts.
I mean, and to be honest, I mean, Fifield is beginning to feel some crunch about what's going up in their neighborhood too, right? So, but anyway, that was just my piece that I wanted you to know. I'm feeling, yes, I'm working on trying to find someone for her because she did come to our meetings and she did talk and we're supportive of that. It's just that it takes time to find folks who, one, would show up at the meeting, committed, and to have someone who can help them through understanding what all of this means. What is a small area plan? What goes into it? You know, that kind of stuff. But anyway, I'm going to move on so we can get up out of here. Is there anything else, Sunshine? Okay, so now we're going to go to D. Thank you, Chris.
Sure.
The HAC annual plan work. Can you?
I just brought up exactly what was left. Like, this has not been updated from the last time the HAC visited it because we can see a lot of the things we've done some work on, but so I'm not sure. Joy, do you just want to go through?
So we might not have time to go through it. Are we meeting next month?
We are.
And maybe what we can do is work on this. Is everybody okay with that? Where we can go through it, see what we have done, and then set a thing for going forward for the calendar year 2026.
Now, would you maybe send it out?
Yeah, that's what I was
Yes.
Because I think maybe somebody just needs to go through this in light of the last few months
Yeah.
and strike
Thank you,
things
Michael.
out and move things around that are obvious.
Okay.
Maybe have something to start with.
Yeah, okay. So if
Okay,
you-
so I can send this
Can I
around.
make a suggestion though?
Yes.
Sorry, which is what I heard Kelly talk about earlier around having the consultants come in and do an evaluation of the program overall and what the opportunities are. That seems very dovetailed with this question of what we focus on in partnership with the city staff around, and so like in some ways I hesitate to jump into this, do a bunch of work on it, and then have the consultants come back with something else and then have to revisit on.
But for me, being that I'm the chair, since we did this, because I hate to do work plans and then we don't never look at it again. Right? Is to look at what we have done and then we don't have what we have done and what still need to be done. And maybe that's part of what can be,
And some of the items that are on there that still have to be done too are really less about our housing program and more about like HAC developing a recruitment strategy. So that's
Okay.
really the work of like a subcommittee that maybe we need to talk about planning meetings for, right? Like that's something that HAC can certainly continue.
well, it's November, so
But yeah, exactly. So we can share it at least. we
pivot
can
that
update
until
what
the
has
November
been
meeting.
done, and what we were thinking about, like what was
Right.
on our radar back when this was formed, because it's been over a year. This was for a whole plan
Yes.
for,
It might not be entirely useless for the consultants to see that.
yeah, that's true too. Yes.
Okay.
My problem with being involved with the consortium is whether or not that's a good use of our time, knowing that so many best practices would require changes in legislation. I mean, just like Alan was saying, well, so-and-so's do it, but Virginia regulations won't allow us to do that. Well, that's not how I want to spend a lot of our time personally.
When we're not standing at the land bank for a year or so, so just
Oh, so then all right. And so the next thing is public comment. Do we have anybody?
I have one.
There are no online.
Oh, no, okay.
No, we have public comment.
I know, I was just saying. there
Oh,
are no
hey, I'm sorry, Wendy.
Hi, I'm really, really fast one because I know that y'all want to get out of here. But my name is Wendy Gao. I'm an organizer at FAR. Some of you, as y'all may have heard, Ms. Joy has talked about it at this body too, but FAR, 10th and Page, West Haven, Bethel residents, we've been organizing and fighting against two large, one's an 11-story, the other's a 7-story student luxury housing buildings on West Main Street above West Haven, 10th and Page, and Fytheville. So we're fighting these development by development, but we are also trying to get a fast-tracked zoning amendment passed through the Planning Commission and City Council, specifically around how the zoning affects these massive by right developments around the edges of low-income historically Black communities. So I just wanted to ask this body to do whatever you all can to help support residents and community concerns. I don't know if that would be like a resolution or a recommendation of some sort, but just wanted to urge and encourage that. Thank you.
Not to give reply to public comment as a general rule, but the Planning Commission has received that message loud and clear, and now haven't said we're doing anything, but if there is something to be done, how do we go about that? And I think that was floated.
Right. And I definitely would like to have a conversation with us about.
You were heard.
Yeah, so, because for me, even though I was involved with, with the code, helping to voice our opinion about the code, I think it was a miss for me about the impact that it will have when you, on the edge of the low-income communities, and that you only have one chance to voice your opinion, which is before the BAR. It's not giving you any other opportunity to be able to say nay or yea or work with us. And so, yeah. Okay. All right. So No more comments? Can I have a motion? Next meeting is scheduled for November 12th. And I think I might be
It's the
here,
second Wednesday
Sunshine.
instead of the third Wednesday, but that's because the third Wednesday is closer to.
It's, yeah, it's closer
holidays.
to the holiday. All right, and I might not be here, Sunshine, so I think I might be at a conference, I'm not sure.
No, wait,
Are you already too at that
19th, 20th.
conference?
Actually, that's why we moved it. We moved it to not be
Okay.
with the GHC. That's
All righty,
why.
if there's nothing else, I have a motion to adjourn.
Do.
second.
Second? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Okay, thank y'all.